SVIVAH is about revolutionizing the way that women come together in community and using Jewish community to empower women as individual change makers in their own lives and in the world. That sentence sounds so different in the context of Esther. Discovering and exploring the unique and beautiful Torah that comes from our lived experience. We define both Jewish and women very broadly. If you want to be with us, we want you with us and welcome. We love that we are multi-generational and diverse in our backgrounds and affiliations, and we come together in celebration and support of women, our strengths, our unique perspectives, and our ways of impacting the world. I know that I say the same exact thing every time that we gather, but I need you to know that there has been so much back-end conversation among Jewish leaders, Jewish nonprofit professionals, teachers, all these amazing people that I get to hang out with all the time, talking about how to bring people together, especially now when it feels really hard and complicated to do just that. And I just want to tell you that, at least for me, and I'm curious if it's this way for you too, when I open our room and see all of your faces pouring in, I don't feel anxiety or nervousness about like, what does it mean? What is this group? What's going to happen? I feel relief. Your faces flood me with relief. I literally feel surrounded and held and buoyed whenever we come together, and tonight is no different. In fact, I think that tonight, this is probably, like, for me, these last like 30 seconds are probably the most important thing of all. But I'll let Aliza get to that, about talking about the importance of gathering and what that means. There are some other folks who we owe some special gratitude to. First, the Silverstein-based Lincoln Park, where Rav Sarah Mulhern works her magic. You should all follow her on social media immediately, because I just want to be a hobbit under the stairs where she lives and creates the Jewish magic that she does. So if you hear any weird knocking, that's me. I'm coming. Thank you also to Maharat. We are so lucky to have Rabba Dr. Anat Sharbat bring us a little closer to Tel Aviv tonight. I'm excited for that. Thank you to the SRE network. SVIVAH has been blessed to work with them for many months now on creating spaces that center survivors of sexual violence and gender-based harm and their experiences, especially the role that community plays in their experience as survivors. And we have the incredible Dr. Guila Benchimol here tonight to share her wise and powerful Torah with us. Thank you also to the Covenant Foundation, who just constantly encourages us to think of ways to bring women together meaningfully, especially now. And to the Aviv Foundation, who does this work every day, being half in Israel and half in the US, and figuring out how to be a bridge to both. Thank you all. I've said it before, and I'm feeling it tonight. I personally, like you've heard me say this too many times, I have a hard time praying in a group. Tefillah b'tzibur, that whole idea of like collective praying, is not where I get my best praying done. But tonight reminds me of why tzibur, why kehila, why sacred community is so powerful and so special. Thank you for being my community. And thank you, Rabbanit Aliza Sperling, for bringing us all together tonight, and so many other SVIVAH nights. You gather us in ways that move into our hearts and stay there. Thank you for always bringing us together in ways that change us.
And I'm so excited to be here with you. My name is Rabbanit Aliza Sperling. I'm the Education Director of SVIVAH. I am so honored to be here with you tonight to learn the Torah about Purim and the power of togetherness in the merit of the hostages held in Gaza. Many of us have been thinking about these hostages for the past 165 days. And the names and faces of these women, men, and children feel to us like family. Tonight, we are going to learn from three wonderful teachers about Esther, the heroine of the Megillah, who was also taken away from her family and community against her will, and what we can learn from her story. 2 years ago, we learned the book of Esther together with adult eyes, recognizing that the beauty pageant that we may have learned about as children was actually a forcible abduction of women to sexual slavery to the king. Once you recognize this And I really don't know why we sell our children a fictionalized account of a beauty pageant which women entered willingly. The whole story changes. As Dr. Guila Benchimol and Rabbi Aviva Richmond taught us 2 years ago, Esther is actually a survivor, and we need to be attentive to her experiences as a survivor and to the experiences of people who are listening to the Megillah who are survivors themselves. This year, our experience of reading the Megillah will be challenged even more with the thoughts of our sisters and brothers who are in captivity in Gaza. I am fervently hoping and praying that this Purim we will experience v'nahafochu, a total reversal, a day in which the hostages will come home now, healthy and whole. Tonight we come together just as the Jews came together to pray for Esther, to convince Achashverosh to nullify the evil decree against them. Guided by our teachers, we'll reach into the text of the Megillah to consider how we can help the hostages and survivors of October 7th through coming together, prayer, ritual, learning, and action. In the beginning of Tractate Megillah, the Talmud tells us something very surprising. The Megillah may actually be read on the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, or 15th of Adar. Nowadays, most of us read the Megillah on the 14th of Adar, unless you live in a walled city and read Megillah on the 15th of Adar. The Gemara tries to derive how we know that the 11th, 12th, and 13th are also permissible dates to read the Megillah. And they say that it's obvious that you can read the Megillah on the 13th because it was a Yom Kihila Lakol. It is a day when everyone assembled. Rashi tells us this means that on the 13th of Adar, all the Jews assembled to fight, right? They were fighting against their enemies in self-defense. But Tosafot rejects this explanation and says that the assembly that really counted on the 13th of Adar was one that we don't hear about in the Megillah. Mordechai and Esther brought all the Jews together as their brothers were fighting the war, and they together fasted and prayed. Tosafot brings a tradition that at this time of actual fighting, everyone who wasn't fighting was coming together, praying, fasting, and doing their utmost for for everyone else who was in danger. Ritva says that that's actually why we fight on Ta'anit Esther, the fast of Esther, which we will have tomorrow, to commemorate this prayer and fasting when our fellow Jews were fighting and in danger. And of course, I want to add here that one way to commemorate Ta'anit Esther is through fasting. But of course, if you can't fast, there are many other ways to commemorate the fast of Esther. I think that this gathering together that Mordechai and Esther modeled for us is what we're doing tonight. We are gathering together at a time of danger to the women and men who are hostages in Gaza. And we know from our history that this act of coming together in prayer, learning, and ritual is meaningful and important. Our teachers tonight will help us delve deeper into the power of our actions. Dr. Guila Benchimol will begin by teaching us about the Esther story and reflecting on her recent trip to Israel to support survivors of October 7th. Rabba Dr. Anat Sharbat is a rabbi in Israel who has been leading Kabbalat Shabbat services, welcoming the Shabbat, and Havdalah every week at Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, every week since October 7th. She will tell us about how she is inspired by Esther and take us on a tour of Hostages Square to show us how it is a place of togetherness and connection, art, and love for the hostages. Rav Sarah Mulhern will lead us in ritual, prayer, and holy brainstorming to think about how we can reach out our hands and hearts to the hostages and their loved ones tomorrow on the fast of Esther, this Shabbat, and Sunday on Purim. We're so grateful to our teachers for being here and sharing their wisdom with us tonight. I am so honored to introduce now Dr. Guila Benchimol, who has been a real light in my life ever since I met her. Dr. Guila Benchimol is a senior advisor on research and learning with SRE Network and was one of the key advisors who guided its launch in early 2018. As a researcher and public educator on sexual violence, she has crafted standards and policies for Jewish workplaces, institutions, and communal spaces, and has been invited to address Jewish professionals and clergy across Canada and the US, as well as other faith communities. You can see more of Dr. Guila Benchimol's bio in the chat. Guila has just returned from a trip to Israel to help survivors, and she will tell us a little bit about that as well.
Thank you so much, Rabbanit Aliza, and thank you everybody for being here. And as always, thank you to the entire SVIVAH team for reminding me that I am a Jewish educator first and everything else second. So I don't think it needs to be said, but I'm going to say it anyway. We're going to talk about some very heavy things this evening. We're going to talk about survivorship and trauma. We're going to talk about sexual violence, and we're going to talk about people that are being kept as hostages. So I might get emotional, you might get emotional or have some other feelings. All of the feelings are okay, but please do what you need to do to take care of yourself as we learn together. And so the framing that I want to talk about tonight is, what does gathering do for survivors and those who have been harmed, whether they have been harmed in direct ways or whether they have been harmed indirectly. So for example, when I was in Israel, a bus driver said to me, I am a survivor too. Everybody in Israel is a survivor. Thank you so much for coming here because we are all survivors. And so how do we show up for survivors, and who are the survivors that we are talking about? And what does Esther's story teach us about how to show up for others? But more, what is the role that we can play when we do so? And in order to do that, I want to look at some of the verses. The main verse we're going to focus on is the one that SVIVAH shared to invite us all to this wonderful learning, which is chapter 4, verse 16. And in chapter 4, verse 16, Esther says to Mordechai, who comes to tell her, and I'm going to put it in the chat, who comes to tell her that she has to risk her life and go to the king. She has to risk her life. She has to go to the king uncalled for, and say that, you know, she is a Jew and he can't kill the Jewish people. And so she says to Mordechai, go assemble all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast on my behalf, neither eat nor drink for 3 days, day and night. Also, I and my maidens will fast in a like manner. Then I will go to the king contrary to the law. I'm not supposed to be going to the king. And if I perish, I perish, right? This is not a foolproof plan. It may blow up in my face, but I'm going to do everything I can to help. So in the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to break it down. And I want to look at 4 questions. I don't know if we're going to get to them all. For those of you who've learned with me before, we'll do our best. So the first question is, why gather? Why does Esther think the response to this moment, to this calamity that is about to befall her people, is to gather? Number 2, why does she use this language of go, lech, kenos, and then assemble? And what does it do for her? What is it going to give her for them to go and assemble? Number 3, what is really the action that she is asking the people to do? Is it the gathering that's the point, or is it the fast that's the point? And then number 4, who is the fast for, then and now? And I want us to think about, who are the survivors of which we speak? Who is it that we're trying to show up for? And underpinning all of this is, how do we show up for survivors and those who've experienced trauma? Okay, sounds like a plan for the next 20 minutes. Okay, so number 1, why gather, right? So I want to compare this verse to an earlier verse in the chapter, and then to an earlier verse in the entire Megillah, which I only looked at yesterday when encouraged by Rabbanit Aliza to delve a little deeper. I think I saw something new, and maybe it will be new for you too. So first of all, Esther is saying you have to go and assemble the people, right? And when we look earlier, when this decree was made, when Haman went to Achashverosh and he told him, I want to destroy the Jewish people, and I really think this would be a good idea for your kingdom, He says to Achashverosh, there is a certain people scattered and separate among the peoples throughout all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws are different from ours, and it is no use for the king to let them be. And so Esther is saying, we need to come together because the way that we are either being perceived or the way that we actually are is divided. We are not standing as one. And so number one, if you want me to go to the king, I actually need us to come together. And in coming together, we will counteract the way that Haman and Achashverosh are perceiving us, the way that the Jewish people seem to appear to those around us. So let's first come together, and then you can maybe ask me to risk my life. And I still don't know if it's going to work. But I also was wondering, where was this sense of loneliness that Esther had, that she knew it needed to be counteracted with coming together? And so I looked earlier in the Megillah, and you see in chapter 2, verse 7, it tells us Mordechai had brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, and she was his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and Mordechai took her to himself for a daughter. And so Esther knew what it was like to be alone, what it was like to feel alone, and what it meant to have someone show up for her and come to her side and say, I will not let you be alone. So her familiarity with loss and her familiarity with being helped by another person gave her insight into what was needed now. And so maybe her individual loneliness translated into her understanding of what national loneliness might be, and how the antidote to that was actually going to be national coming together. And in fact, Dr. Yael Machtinger wrote yesterday in a piece about Agunot and Esther this year, Esther unites the Jewish people, and it's only then that her story and theirs begins to change. So number one, why did she say to gather the people? Because she realized that they were being perceived or were actually scattered and divided. But number two, she already knew what it felt like to be alone and to have someone show up for her. And she said, I need that help again, but it can't be just you, Mordechai. I actually need an assembly of people. I need the entire nation. Okay, fine. Question two then. Why does she use this language of lech kenos, go and assemble? She could have just told him, assemble the people, right? Why this double language? And what does the gathering actually do for her? And in this piece of the Megillah, in this part of the story, you'll notice maybe when you're reading it on Purim, that it is a pivotal point in the story. Esther begins to find her voice, and we see her as an active agent rather than a passive woman to whom directives are being given over to by men. And so she looks at Mordechai, or she hears that Mordechai is sitting in the entrance of the palace in sackcloth and ashes, and she says, what are you doing? How is this going to help anyone? You can't solve this alone. Go and gather the people. But how does this gathering give her agency and voice? Now, this is not what we find in the Megillah. This is what we find in the research on those who have been traumatized, on the work of Dr. Judith Herman, who talks about what trauma survivors and survivors of sexual abuse need and want from other people. And this is why I believe Esther asks for that assembly. So Dr. Judith Herman writes, if trauma is truly a social problem, and indeed it is, she says she sees this in all kinds of trauma, it's the same thing. Recovery cannot be a private matter. Recovery is about the community. And so here we see Mordechai is taking orders from Esther, not just the woman he rescued anymore after her parents' death, but the queen who is about to risk her life. And she recognizes it might not work. So she says, I will do this, but I need the community. If the community will come along with me, then I will go ahead. And Judith Herman writes that there are 3 stages in recovery, and she recently discovered a 4th. I'm only going to talk about the 1st and the 4th because we don't have time for them all. But the first stage of recovery is about safety, okay? And safety, Dr. Herman says, is not an individual matter. You cannot feel safe alone. Safety has to do with finding a sort of supportive community. Safety, the stage where you need community, is actually the stage that allows the other ones to unfold. So Esther is saying, you want me to If I perish, I perish. I will only take that risk if the community comes along with me. And this is the same as what we see in trauma studies. And Dr. Herman recently wrote a book asking, what is it that survivors actually want? And did their pursuit of justice meet their needs? And that is the fourth stage. It is justice. And this is what she writes about justice. When survivors receive acknowledgement and apologies and amends from their communities, it restores the survivor's faith in humanity. It restores a sense of belonging. You can think of justice as being part of a community where everyone belongs, everyone is respected, and everyone has a voice. And so Esther is saying, we're all divided. How am I supposed to stand up for the community that is not even behind itself? Get with the program, get it together, Jewish people, so that I can feel you're with me and so that I can risk my life. And I want to read what Dr. Herman says about trauma, because to me, this is the exact idea of why we're gathering tonight and what we're talking about. And I'll put everything in the chat later. Traumatic events destroy the sustaining bonds between individuals and community. Those who have survived learn that their sense of self, their worth, their humanity depends upon a feeling of connection with others. The solidarity of a group provides the strongest protection against terror and despair, and the strongest antidote to traumatic experience. Trauma isolates, the group recreates belonging. Trauma shames and stigmatizes, the group bears witness and affirms. Trauma degrades the victim, the group exalts her. Trauma dehumanizes, the group restores. Again and again and again, this is the theme of what survivors have shared. And this is why, in fact, we're gathering today. We're gathering today to honor those who have been severely, severely traumatized, those who are being severely, severely traumatized. And that's why we're going to gather on Purim and in the fast. And if you can't fast in other ways, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. So the antidote to trauma and isolation is community. Esther knew from her own vulnerability what it was like to be alone. Esther knew this from her history, and she saw that the Jews were scattered, and she said, you too, on a national level, you're being traumatized. Let's come together so that I can go. And what I want to show is that Mordechai responds in what I think is a survivor-centered way. In that chapter where Mordechai tells her, you have to go to the king, and she says, well, I'm not allowed to go to the king. And he says, well, you think you're going to save yourself by being quiet? Someone else is going to come along and do the saving, and you will perish. There's this back and forth. But as soon as Esther makes the demand to go and assemble the Jews, what does the pasuk tell us? We don't hear from Mordechai. There's no back and forth anymore. Mordechai passed and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. He right away is quiet. He doesn't have one word to say. He listens to this woman and he says, okay, you have it. I'm going to do that. He doesn't ask her, how do you know this is the right thing? Do we really need to fast? And you're going to see how odd it is because they were already fasting. The verse before tells us that they were already fasting. So why does she ask them to fast? If we get there, we'll get there. But that's another question that we'll cover. So he heard her and did exactly what she asks. And I want to go back to Dr. Herman, who says, listening to a survivor, therefore, turns out to be a radical act. And that is what Mordechai did. And so I want to turn a little bit to my time in Israel and what led me there. When October 7th happened, I really, really wanted to go, and I wanted to go right away. And I had so many feelings, but I was really, really speechless. I didn't post on social media because I didn't know what to say. I had no words. There were no words. And I was very lucky to be invited by NCJW with many, many others, including the SVIVAH team, to go to the UN to listen to the testimony of first responders. And I sat there listening to the first responders talk about what they witnessed on October 7th. And I was watching these stories of sexual violence unfold. And I was watching the world's response. And the world's response was silence, denial, or glee. And I was horrified because I literally changed my life from being a Jewish educator to become a criminologist who would study this very thing. And I learned from so many mentors outside of the Jewish world, and I brought their Torah, their teaching, to the Jewish world to explain what happens to survivors and what happens to sexual violence. And not all of them, but many were quiet, or many said harmful things. And I didn't know what to do with that. And so when I came home from the UN, I poured my heart into a letter to the survivors, because I was watching this narrative play out where people were saying, the feminists have abandoned us, and why are you silent, or why are you this? But I wanted to say something to the survivors themselves. I didn't want to talk to us, because I knew that we knew what the problem was, but I wanted to talk to the survivors. And so I wrote a letter to the survivors, and I'm very grateful that it was published. And then I printed off that letter, and everywhere I went in Israel where I encountered survivors, I gave it to them. And that's why that bus driver said that to me. He saw that I gave a survivor a letter, and he said, I'm a survivor. Can I have that letter? You wrote this. I want to read that letter too, because I'm a survivor too. And so I want to read you two parts of that letter. One, because the women that I met with at the UN told me that that was the language they needed, and maybe it will give you something. And the other is because the SVIVAH team asked me to read parts of the letter, not because I think it's special or anything like that. Please understand why I'm sharing it. So I'm going to read you two specific parts. The first is what I wanted to say to the victims. What you are experiencing now is secondary victimization, where after being victimized, one is treated negatively with insensitivity, disbelief, or blame. There are those who are reacting horrifically with callousness, denials, or silence, and some even with glee, to the reality of what you faced. They don't seem to understand that after everything you've suffered and continue to withstand, it is an added layer of immorality and injury to demand that you publicly parade your pain and the ways in which your loved ones were horrifically violated. But I also said to them, you are more than what was done to you on October 7th, and the same is true for those you lost. We read your stories and learn about your beautiful, full lives that go beyond this terribly traumatic victimization, and we watch in awe as you use your strength to rally around and advocate for each other and bring your hostages home. And I want to share that when I wrote this letter, I also said, well, I'm really writing this to Israeli, so it has to be in Hebrew too. And so I worked on the translation with my sister, who has been living in Israel for 30 years. And my sister said to me, you know, you should go a little softer. Don't name the beheadings and the rapes and the burnings. Don't name that. It's too much. And I said, no, I'm going to name it all, because what I know from working with survivors is that naming is the most important thing. And it is the first step so that survivors feel what happened to them was real, what happened to them is acknowledged from others. And Dr. Judith Herman found that too, that is what justice meant. The naming and the acknowledgement was the path of justice. And so there's a lot that I can share about Israel, and I'm not going to be able to share it all. But what I want to share with you is we went on our own. My husband and I created our own little mission for many different reasons. And we asked ourselves, what are the skills that we have that we can bring to Israel? And who are the people that we can meet to try and help while we're there? And we met with many different people. People who have a wide range of opinions on what's going on in Israel, a wide range of opinions of their experiences of what happened, but their gratitude for people showing up for them, not just us, but they talked about Amerikaim, the Americans, all of the work that is being done, such as this gathering. When I told people that we are gathering tonight, people in Israel who've lost loved ones, they were so moved, they couldn't believe that women were gathering to do this tonight. I heard some horrific testimony, and I thanked every person, and I said, I know this is not a story that you're telling. I know this is your life. And I know that you're not just talking about your neighbor, but you're talking about a loved one when you are telling us the story. And I even had to ask a first responder if I could record him in the home where something really traumatic happened, because I said, there are denials about this. And a woman said to me, Guila, is there a magic key? Is there a magic key that if we say this thing, the world is going to suddenly believe or change their mind? And I said, no, I don't think so. But it's not about them. It's about me remembering the people that you are talking about. And one father said, remember my daughter's name, Daphna Garkovich, and her husband, Ivan Garkovich. Remember her name. And when you go home, please tell everyone about her. Tell everyone what you saw. Tell everyone what you heard. And I can't tell everyone because it's not appropriate. Not everyone can hear, and that's okay too. That's honoring other people's feelings about trauma. We only have 3 more minutes and there's still so much more. A few other quick things. When Rachel Goldberg, the mother of Hirsch Goldberg, asks us to write a number, right, on tape, and we put it on our heart, does it make a difference? You know who it makes a difference to? Rachel Goldberg, because that's what she asked us to do. That's honoring her and centering what she's asking us to do. And so I want to talk about another kind of survivor and relate this back to Esther. And so those are the shkufim. The shkufim are the transparent ones, or maybe the invisible ones. Those are people that have been greatly affected by October 7th, but they don't really have a place. For example, the grandparents of people who have died. They can't sit Shiva. They're there trying to pick up the pieces for their kids who are sitting Shiva, but they are also struggling. Or the in-laws of people who have passed away, right? They're there trying to help their family members, but they don't have a place. What can we do for them? She was asking me. And she said, the Chagim are coming, the holidays are coming. How are they going to have Purim? How are they going to sit at the Pesach Seder? What if we, as a little community, could say, we're going to send flowers to those grandparents to say, we see you. What if we could send to those in-laws a little something for the Chag, a letter, right? To say, we know that you are part of this group. And so going back to Esther, I just want to go to this wonderful thing that I read, this other new piece. Rabbanit Aliza, thank you for encouraging me to delve deeper, by Sarah Rudolph. She writes about the fast. And I want to note, not all of us can fast. Some of us cannot fast for health reasons and shouldn't fast. And she writes about the fact that this fast is very different than all other fasts. This fast is about community. This fast is not actually about repentance and mourning. It's about social cohesion, which is everything that we've been talking about this evening. This fast is about lech kenos. And so what was it that Esther was asking for if the Jewish people were already fasting, as we see in the previous verse? Because Esther was saying, fast alai, fast for me. I have been living in this kingdom. I didn't know all of this was going on. I am so far removed from the people. But by you fasting, you're bringing me close to you. You are doing something for me. So this fast is about how can we come closer to all of the survivors, the ones we know are suffering, and the shkufim, the ones that we might not. Think tonight about what it is that we are going to do to move forward. May we get to the place where those who've suffered show up for them because we are already by their side. And may every last hostage be returned home soon. I turn it over now.
Amen. Thank you so much, Guila, for those beautiful words and that beautiful teaching. There is a lot that you said tonight that I have to think about for a long time. I just want to note 2 things that came up. One is when you quoted Dr. Judith Herman and you said something along the lines of, trauma can only be healed through community. Wow. It's not just, right, getting the hostages back, and that, of course, is something that we pray for every day, but it's also being there for the hostages, being there for the survivors, being there for survivors in our own communities as well. And then Cheryl Sylvester in the chat wrote something that got a lot of people responded to, and I saw it also, and I really responded to it. She wrote, the kind of community that can truly show up is a community that must be cultivated. How can we become that kind of community? What a powerful question that I know many of us are trying to answer, and I would love to answer together with all of you. That's really what the rest of tonight is going to be about. Rabba Dr. Anat Sharbat is an Israeli rabbi. She lives in Tel Aviv. It is now almost 3 a.m. for her, so we didn't ask her to come in person to SVIVAH, but she has been doing something really extraordinary since October 7th. Every Friday since October 7th, she has been going to Hostages Square And she has been leading Kabbalat Shabbat, the Friday evening services. And then after Shabbat, she's been leading Havdalah at the end of Shabbat, every single week at Hostages Square. And so she has been trying to create that kind of community that really stands up for others who need it. And I've been so interested. I get her WhatsApps and every week, and I always wish that I could be there. And so I asked her to reflect a little bit about why she does this and what she learns from the book of Esther. So we're going to see first a short clip where she's going to talk to us from her Tel Aviv apartment, and she's going to tell us what she learns from Esther. Then we'll come back together, and I'll give you a little bit more of an introduction to her, and then she's going to take us to Hostages Square in Tel Aviv and show us what happens there. Okay, Rabbanit Liz, are you ready? Thank you.
Shalom. This year is a complicated year to celebrate Purim. It is written in the Megillah, "Vatilakach Esther el Beit HaMelech," and Esther was taken to the king's palace. ובכל יום ויום מרדכי מתהלך לפני חצר בית הנשים לדעת את שלום אסתר ומה יעשה בה. And every day Mordechai is walking around the palace to understand what's going on with Esther. We also have people that were taken out of Israel, were taken to Gaza, were kidnapped. And we do not have any access to go around and to understand what's going on with them. No international access even. The Red Cross has no access, none of any other organization. Nobody knows what's going on with our hostages in Gaza. We have a clue of some of them, but the understanding is right for 100 days ago when some of the hostages came back. But now we don't know. And the Megillah is continuing, and it is said that Haman didn't like Mordechai. He didn't like Mordechai and he wanted to kill him. But when he found out that Mordechai is a Jew, he wanted to kill every Jew. Every Jew, not only around the palace, but every Jew in the whole world of Ahasuerus. And this reminds us something terrible. This is also known again in our history, unfortunately. And now we experience also that kind of hatred, anti-Semitism. My suggestion is that this Purim is not a moment that we can celebrate and be happy and can feel the happiness and through this do the mitzvot, but the opposite. We are doing the mitzvot of happiness in Purim because we have to, because this is the commandment, this is the mitzvah. We will hold the pain, the cry, the pain of those who fell, our heroes, the cry for those who are not with us, that they will come back, the hostages, the Chatufim. We are going to celebrate this Purim because we have to celebrate as a mitzvah, not because we feel celebration, not because we feel happiness. This will be a celebration through a mitzvah and through connection to our tradition, to our masoret, to our big picture as a nation. This celebration will be with a pain, as we know also throughout our tradition, as we know in a wedding that we break a glass to remember that we are happy, but we are also sad. So this year, my suggestion is to think how we can hold it together, how we can be mindful of this situation and be mindful of this mitzvah. Purim Sameach, and I hope that this coming days will give us a good reason to celebrate. If it will be a deal that our hostages will come back, and then we will be able to celebrate with them. Amen.
Amen. Amen. So on behalf of Rabba Anat, if anybody is going to be in Tel Aviv this weekend, I want to invite you to come to the Hostages Square at 5:30 p.m. for Kabbalat Shabbat for Friday night services, and then for Havdalah after Shabbat at 7:15 p.m. Rabba Anat does this every single week. Besides doing this, Rabba Dr. Anat Sharbat is the co-founder of Shalom Aleichem Kihila in Tel Aviv, and she previously served as Associate Rabba at the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale. She graduated from Bar Ilan with an MA, and she received a PhD in Talmud. She was born and raised in Israel. So now we really have a treat because Rabba Anat is going to take us on a tour of Hostages Square. I know that some of us have been to Israel since October 7th and have been there, and some of us have not. It's really an amazing place. And she's going to show us, as she shows us around, I think you'll see why she thinks it's so important to gather people together, to bring community together, to cultivate community, as Cheryl said, at this place. I want to caution you that because it's outside, the volume is not fantastic, so you might need to do whatever you can to be able to hear a little bit more, but it's worth it. Okay.
Shalom, my name is Anat Sharbat, Rabba Anat Sharbat, and I am volunteer every Shabbat since October 7th to daven Kabbalat Shabbat and Havdalah every Shabbat since October 7th. The reason I started my Kabbalat Shabbat was this table. This long table that is waiting for the thing to come back was put in this square that I will show you on Thursday after October 7th. As you see, the table is changing here. In the beginning, the table was set for 241 hostages to come back home for Shabbat. Look how long the table is. Now the table's set because some of the hostages came back. So half of the table is saying welcome back, and half of the table is setting with this, with the food that the hostages get in their captivity in Hamas. It's a very small pita bread, with water that is not clean, and a little bit of cheese, and sometimes a date. This we know because the hostages that came back told us that this is what they had in their captivity. As I said, half of the table is saying Baruch Shuvchem because half of the hostages, Baruch Hashem, are back home. So you see the difference between this table to this table. And we hope that all the hostages will come back and we will be able to set the table with celebrity and to celebrate with them here and to daven with them here, Kabbalat Shabbat. These are tulips, yellow tulips, like the symbol, the yellow symbol of the hostages. It's international, and every Friday they sell here a hope flower bouquet that people are buying and take home to raise awareness, like everything here in this hostages. This is another initiative doing yoga for Carmel. She's a hostage in Gaza. She is a yoga teacher and practice yoga, and every Friday morning there is a special yoga practice. Many people come to practice, and before they start to practice the yoga, they count the days that the hostages are in Gaza. Today is 161, it's Friday. This is the tunnel that the hostages are kept in, or keeping in, that are kept in, sorry. The tunnel is imitates the tunnels in Gaza. It's here as art, very scary art, and raising awareness of what's going on. I will go through the tunnel. You will hear the bombing and the steps that the Hamas is doing, and to think that they are 161 days into the tunnel is scary. They don't see daylight. This is what they hear. Think that they are 161 days in this tunnel. This is a very short tunnel. You can imagine.
Thank you so much, Rabba Anat, and thank you, Rabbanit Liz. If you want to see the full video, we will send it out, and we'll also put it on our website so that you can see it. And I think it'll be a little bit easier to hear also if you see it straight from the website. Here we see the ways in which community heard about tragedy and they came together. When you come to Hostages Square, you just see all these people kind of converging because they feel like they need to be together, they need to do something. And they're doing things with all their different strengths, right? Some people are producing beautiful art, some people are doing yoga, some people are writing messages to the hostages and to their families. It's just a coming together. It's this incredible spiritual response of Lech Knosset Kol HaYudim, come and bring together all the Jews. So thank you, Rabba Anat. what else can we do, right? How else can we come together to harness that spiritual power of Lech Knos et Kol Hayudim, of go and bring together all the Jews? I'm so happy that we have with us Rav Sarah Mulhern. Sarah, I keep saying Sarah because I was just in Israel in that video, but now I'll go back to America. Rav Sarah Mulhern is a rabbi, educator, and community builder. She serves as the rabbi of Silverstein-based Lincoln Park, opening her home and her heart to young adults and college students from across Chicago. She passionately believes that Torah matters and that Judaism can enrich human life and better society. She's a wonderful Torah educator, frequently teaching in a wide variety of Jewish adult education settings, especially on topics of ethics, gender, and Jewish practice. You can see the rest of her bio in the chat. I do want to say that I'm also grateful to Rav Sarah because Ariella and I had been thinking, what can we do for Purim? How can we highlight the hostages and what can we do? And Rav Sarah also reached out and said, what are we doing? And on our own, we couldn't figure it out, but when we came together, we could. So thank you, and we're so happy you're here with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Rabba Aliza. It's just such a joy to be in this space, even when we talk about hard things. So as Rabba Aliza said, I want to take us now into a place where we can think about spiritual activism. As we heard so beautifully from Dr. Guila, right, when Esther needed to go and do the hard and terrifying and crucial leadership that she did for our people, she first asked Mordechai to Lech Knos et Kol Hayudim, right? Go and gather together, bring together all the Jewish people to pray and to fast on her behalf. And I think there's an important detail that is sort of haunting me this year, which is that she asked for them to be brought together to give her strength, even though she couldn't be with them, right? She was not able to go and be with them in that gathering, and yet the fact of its existence strengthened her. And I'm a bit of a rationalist, so I can't totally explain what this mechanism is or how this works. But I really deeply, deeply believe in my heart and my soul and in my body that our coming together in this space and in other spaces and our weaving more deeply our communities together gives strength to our hostages. And even if I can't completely understand how that works, I really, really believe that we can give them strength in our coming together in community and in prayer. So what I want to do in our short little remaining time is think together about what are some ways that we can, in very concrete ways, come together in prayer, in ritual, and in community to offer strength to our hostages. And I think we have a really special opportunity of Tani Esther, which begins tomorrow morning, of Purim itself, and because of the way it falls out this year, the Shabbat between Tani Esther and Purim, as each one a sort of distinct, beautiful moment with its own themes and its own opportunities to do this kind of gathering to give strength to our hostages. So I'm putting in the chat a Padlet link, and I hope most people will be able to access it. Padlet is just a space where we can kind of brainstorm together in writing, where we'll be able to see what people write and their comments a little bit more permanently, visually than in the chat, where things move too quickly for me at least. Also, if you can't access it or if you can't see everything that's happening, that's fine. I know that the amazing SVIVAH team is going to gather all of this Torah and send it out after the session. But what I want to ask you to do for those who can access the Padlet is I'm going to take you through some of the practices that I'm taking on over Tani Esther, the fast of Esther, over Shabbat, and over Purim itself. And I want to offer this as a space where I would love folks to also lift up and offer any other practices that you are going to be taking on or you want to suggest and offer to this community. So if you can access the Padlet, you'll see you can just make little comments as Post-it notes, and everyone can make them, and you can make them in different colors. So if this doesn't work, it's fine, but I want to encourage people to put in red any ideas that are related to the fast, in blue any ideas that are specifically for Shabbat, and in purple any ideas that are for the for the day of Purim. And also, if you can't access the Padlet, you can throw them in the chat, and the SVIVAH team will do their best to get them up on the Padlet. So I'm going to give some examples just to get our thinking going, and then I'll open space to offer anybody else who would want to add to the Padlet. So some of the ideas that we put up here that I'm taking on personally for myself for the fast specifically is that if you are able to fast, which is not everybody, but if you are able to give up food and drink for the day, you can dedicate that fast in the merit of a particular hostage. If you go to this link here, the Times of Israel link, there are profiles of each and every hostage, and you can think about them as a specific person with a name and a story and list them up in your fast. Whether or not you're able to fast, you can use tomorrow as an opportunity to recite Psalms in the name and for the merit of the hostages to offer them strength. There's actually an organization, Everyone Counts, you can see that website here, that offers encouragement to take on the fast of Esther, even if it's not a practice that's widely observed outside of some parts of the Jewish community, and maybe it's not something you would ever have done before, but maybe this year is the year in the merit of the hostages, and may have also some resources, source sheets, and facilitation guides that might help structure that experience for you. For thinking about for Shabbat, I wrote here a kavanah that you might choose to use when you light Shabbat candles, asking God to bring light and joy into your home through the Shabbat candles, and also that there should be light and joy for the Jewish people through the hostages coming home. And so that might be a kavanah that you might want to use this Shabbat when you light candles. You might want to light. I'm seeing someone put this up. I've been lighting additional candles for a particular hostage. There's this beautiful website, Taste Like Home, that has been collecting recipes from the families of hostages, sharing some of the favorite dishes of the hostages, and maybe you choose to cook one of them for your Shabbat table. You could set an empty seat at your Shabbat table and also dedicate that for a particular hostage. Coming into Purim itself, I think one of the most neglected mitzvot, but I think the most important in some ways, mitzvah of Purim is mitzvah of matanot levionim, the special commandment to give tzedakah, to give funds to someone for direct poverty relief on Purim Day. And so my family is taking on that we're going to give more than our usual amount this year, and we're going to ask that whatever merit or good energy is generated in the universe by that extra gift, that it should be for the hostages and not for us. I know some folks are putting the hostage posters in their Mishloach Manot or hanging them up at their Purim celebrations. And I can see other ideas are coming in. So I'm going to pause talking for a moment and just offer, if anyone else wants to write and post any kind of idea that you think would bring strength, would bring community, bring gathering for our hostages over Tanit, Esther, Shabbat, or Purim. Taking an extra effort to give Mishloach Manot to people who you know are lonely or suffering, putting the favorite foods for the hostages in Mishloach Manot, singing over Shabbat, praying over Shabbat, putting a note in your Mishloach Manot that as people say the brachot on the food that as they bless over the food, that they should think of and dedicate that to the hostages. For me, create maybe a more public gathering space than you might otherwise. There's a worldwide call to say Shema all across the world at a particular time tomorrow that you could participate in. Make a playlist for Purim that has songs related to the hostages or related to strength and solidarity. You set your Suda at your Purim meal for hostages. Dedicating our yoga practice to Carmel Gat, who is a hostage who is an incredible yoga teacher. Singing Hatikva in the worldwide Hatikva sing. Okay, so I want to encourage anyone who is able to access the Padlet as these beautiful ideas are coming together. You can see there's an opportunity to heart them. And I want you to heart them, not just if you like them, because they're all very beautiful, but if you like sort of can look through and see like what's one that I really feel I can take on, and to heart or like the ones that you think you can take on, so we can start to get a little bit of visual hints of all the sort of beautiful actions that are going to be coming together and are going to be generated just out of the incredible women that are gathering together in this space right now. Okay, this resource will continue to exist. It's going to be sent around to this whole group, and I know I already feel moved by just seeing these ideas flowing and knowing that my prayers will be joined together with prayers of so many incredible Jewish women in this space. And so to sort of come together and close our evening, we've been talking so much about joining together in prayer. So I want to do a little prayer together. We're going to start by reading the names, the 134 names of people who are currently being held in Gaza as captives. And I just want to remind us that it's a lot of names. It takes a while to read them. And so I know in myself, I feel my attention wandering. I feel the length of time starting to be like, oh, this is taking a long time. So I just want to remind us to bring us back to, it's a few minutes to sit with their names. It's 160 days that they have been sitting in Gaza and that their families have been sitting waiting for them, and just to remind us to try and keep our focus over the course of the names. So we have some wonderful volunteers from our community who are going to read through the names, and I believe that also we have some beautiful art. An Israeli artist who has dedicated her practice since October 7th to creating a portrait each day of a different hostage. And we're going to see some of those images, and we're going to hear their names and just be reminded that it's not an idea, it's not a theoretical group of people. These are real humans with stories and faces and loved ones. So we'll read the names, and then once we've concluded reading the names, I'll read the Mishaberach, the special prayer asking for the return of the hostages.
Amir Adler, Hisham Shaban Al-Sayed, Liri Albag, Eden Alexander, Kaid Farhan Al-Qadi, Hamza Al-Ziadne, Yosef Al-Ziadne, Noah Argumani, Karina Ariev, Sahar Baruch, Uriel Baruch, Ohad Ben Ami, Ron Benjamin, Agam Berger, Gali Berman, Ziv Berman, Ariel Bibas, Kfir Bibas, Shiri Bibas, Yarden Bibas, Joshi Bipin.
Rom Rafslavsky, Elkana Buchbat, Yagev Buchstab, Amit Esther Buskila, Tal Chaimi, Zichrono Levracha, Itai Chen, Zichrono Levracha, Elia Cohn, Nimrod Cohn, Amiram Cooper, Ariel Cunio, David Cunio, Guy Gilboa Dalal, Emily Damari, Alexander Danzig, Ori Danino, Eviatar David, Sagi Dekel Chen, Mohamed El Atrash, Yitzhak Algart, Matan Engrest, Carmel Gat, Yitzhak Gelerenter, Daniela Gilboa, Hirsch Goldberg, Poland.
Hadar Golden, Oren Golden, Romy Gonen, Ran Gavili, Gad Hagai, Inbar Heyman, Maxime Herkin, Orion Hernandez Rado, Eitan Horn, Yair Horn, Sahi Idan, Almag Jan, Ophir Calderon, Seged Kalfon, Elad Katsir, Andrei Kozlov, Bar Kupushtin, Shai Levinson, Eitan Levy, Naama Levy,
Or Levy, Eliakim Lieberman, Oded Lifshitz, Alexander Lobanov, Shlomo Mansour, Avra Mengistu, Yoram Metzger, Omri Miran, Joshua Loitu Molel, Avraham Monder, Eitan Moore, Gadi Moshe Moses, Omer Nutra, Tamir Nimrod, Michelle Nissenbaum, Sondaya Waka Rastri.
Yosef Ohana, Alon Ohel, Avinatan O, Dror O, Daniel Perez, Zichrono Livracha, Chaim Perry, Natapong Pinta, Nadav Papelwell, Leor Rodaif, Surasak Rumnao, Suthisak Rintalak, Yonatan Mordechai Samarano, Zichrono Livracha, Amog Sarusi, Banawat Sithao, Eli Sharabi, Yossi Sharabi, Zichrono Livracha, Oron Shaul, Zichrono Livracha, Omer Shem Tov, Tal Shoham, Idan Shtivi, Keith Samuel Siegel, Wachara Suryaun,
Doron Steinbrecher, Satyan Svanakam, Itai Sversky, Pongsak Thena, Elizabeth Chorkov, Sasha Alexander Trupanov, Omer Van Kurt, Judy Weinstein, Ilan Weiss, Yair Yaakov, Hanan Yablonka, Ohad Yahalomi, Arbel Yehud, Dolev Yehud, Aiden Yerushalayimi, Matan Zankor Shlomi Ziv.
Yishaberach Avotinu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel Leah Adonai Matir Asurim Hu Yivarech V'Yishmor V'Yinsor V'Yichazek Et HaShavuyot VeHashavuyim B'toch Sha'ar Achienu V'Achotenu Beit Yisrael Uvnei HaNechar Anuvim Aleinu Netunim B'Tzara U'Shivya V'Avor Sha'Kahal HaKadosh Hazeh Mitpalim Ba'avoram Im Kol Kilot HaKodesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rechamim Alehem V'Yotziem Michoshech Le'ora Mitzal Mavet Lechaim U'Mosrotehem Yinatek Mitzukotehem Yoshiem V'Shiv'em Mehira Lechek Mishchotehem V'Kuyam Behem HaKatuv Uftuye Adonai Yeshuvon Uva'u Tzion Berina V'Simchat Olam Al Rosham V'Sason V'Simcha Yasigu V'Nasu Yagon Anacha V'Nomar Amen. I don't have an English translation, but I'll attempt to real-time translate it just so we all get a taste of the words. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, God who freed captives. God will bless and guard and strengthen and defend the captives, men and the women among them, all of our brothers and sisters from the house of Israel and those not from the house of Israel who stand alongside us, who are held in narrowness and in captivity. Through the power of this sacred community, praying on their behalf alongside all sacred communities, God should be filled up with mercy for them and should bring them from darkness into light, from the shadow of death into life, and their suffering should be abated, and they should be redeemed from their captivity, and they should be returned immediately to the loving embrace of their family. And it should be made true through them, the verse which says that the captives, God's beloved captives, will be returned and they will come to Jerusalem in joy, and eternal gladness will be on their heads, and joy and happiness will be established, and sighing and sadness will go away. And let us say Amen. So I just want to end by saying that was heavy. I'm barely holding it together. I feel the tears flowing. And I think it's so important that we have these rituals which help us to remember and to maintain focus on and hold up the real, profound, unimaginable suffering. And I think we also need to connect to rituals that help hold up strength and help hold up hope. I think Rabbanit Aliza opened so beautifully when she said that the story that we're sold as children about the beauty pageant is so absurd when you actually read the Megillah. You actually read the Megillah, it's a truly terrifying story, right? It's a story of women being taken from their homes into sexual slavery. It's a story of a genocidal maniac who wants to bring an end to the Jewish people and just barely doesn't succeed. It's a story of tremendous violence and fear and vulnerability. And I think Purim as a holiday is all about how to process that really horrifying story. And I take a lot of strength and a lot of wisdom from the idea that there are 4 mitzvot of Purim. The 4 mitzvot of Purim are hearing the Megillah, having a mishteh, having a festive meal, matnot avyonim, and mishloach manot, giving gifts of support to those who are in financial need, and sending parcels of food between friends and community members. And when I think about that rubric of those 4 mitzvot, I think there's a really strong alignment between those mitzvot and the Torah that Guila taught us about what is needed for survival and survivors and recovery, right? We have one mitzvah that says, let's name it. Let's look directly at the hard and scary thing. Let's read the Megillah and let's look at it and see what happens. And then we have another mitzvah that allows us to move away from that a little bit and says, you don't have to move into that horror. You can also have joy. You can also have time together with your community. You can have silly costumes. You can maybe even drink a little wine if that's good for you. And then two full mitzvahs, right? Half of the mitzvot of Purim, which are about connecting to our community and caring for others, right? We take the trauma and the fear and the horror of what happened and what almost happened on Purim, and we channel that in to mitzvot, which help us and actually kind of force us to connect more deeply with our community members and to care for the most vulnerable members of that community, right? Twice as many of the mitzvot are about saying, yes, look at the scary stuff. Yes, take care of yourself, but twice as much lean in to connection, lean into care. So I want to just encourage, as we think about which of the mitzvot on this Padlet or which we haven't even generated yet, we're going to take on to ourselves, to make sure we also lift up the ones that help us care for each other and help us build deeper connections to each other as Jewish women. So I want to close my time and almost all of our time by just doing a little bit of singing. I know Zoom is not that great for singing, so I'm going to sing, and I encourage you to sing along with your microphone off, or if you're not a singer, to just listen. I'm going to sing one very short phrase a few times over as a kind of meditation and a kind of prayer to just sort of soak into our hearts. The words are from Megillat Esther, from the Megillah that we read on Purim. Layudim hayta orah v'simcha. The words also show up in Havdalah that Rabba Anat has been making every week in Hostage Square. Layudim hayta orah v'simcha. For the Jewish people, there was, and there will be light and joy. Layudim hayta orah v'simcha v'sason v'ikar. LaYehudim hayta orah v'simcha v'sason v'ikar. Hey, so let it be for us. כן תהיה לנו, כן תהיה לנו, כן תהיה לנו, כן תהיה לנו, כן תהיה לנו. ליהודים הייתה אורה, הייתה אורה, ושמחה בששון ויקר. ליהודים הייתה אורה, הייתה אורה, ושמחה בששון ויקר. כן תהיה לנו, 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 כן תהיה לנו.
Wow, thank you so much, Rav Sarah. That song, the way you sang it, just really, it went straight into me. And I really thank you for that. Thank you for your teaching, for your beautiful teaching. Thank you, Dr. Guila Benchimol, for your beautiful teaching. Thank you, Rabba, Dr. Anat Sharbat, for your teaching and for taking us to Hostages Square tonight. And thanks to everybody for coming together. As Rav Sarah said, I don't know what it is, but I have faith. Ani ma'amina be'emunah shlema. I believe with full faith that our coming together in kindness and support does something, and that the power of our coming together will have an effect. So I am so glad to be here with you, and I'm so inspired by tonight. Thank you. We are going to send out links for everything that we shared tonight, the beautiful paintings, the videos, the Padlet, everything is going to come out to you. If you have other ideas that you want to share in the Padlet, please do. Please share the ideas for how to bring the hostages and Israel to Tanit Esther, the fast of Esther, the Shabbat, to Purim with your friends, your family, your communities. Let's do this together and expand the circle, expand the nourishing community together. One of the things I love most about SVIVAH is that we are a place of lech kenoset kol hayudim, of come and bring together all different types of Jews from all different backgrounds. And step one is bringing us together with love. And step two is figuring out, if we're so different from each other, how can we talk to each other? How can we learn to really talk to each other with such different perspectives? And that is really something that we're seeing in the United States, where I live, in Israel and other places. You might be seeing in your Pesach, if you have family coming for Pesach or friends with different opinions. We all want to come together, but we have to figure out how to talk to each other when we come together. So our next HerTorah before Pesach is going to be about the redemptive power of speech, and how Pesach can teach us how to communicate with each other and how to come together through speech. And it's going to have a companion program about difficult conversations. So the HerTorah piece is going to be Torah, and the companion piece will be the following week, and it'll be with a psychologist to talk about, well, what do we do in these situations? What are some strategies that we can use to have real communication? So I hope that you will come and join us for that as well. I'm going to hand it over to Ariella Mortkowitz, who is really the heart and the soul behind all of this. Ariella.
Thank you. Okay, before everybody leaves, I just want to also add we have so much gathering coming up, which is like amazing and giving me such fortitude, the idea of being together with all of you in so many different ways. So in addition to the 2 programs that Aliza just described, we also have starting next week a month-long series called Ye'ud with Rabbanit Dahlia Davis, our Director of Pastoral Education. This is her brain, heart, and soul child. This beautiful idea of creating a pop-up community for a month, coming together with an intimate group to learn, to create, to tackle whatever it is on your heart, to share as a community. It's a small group that's going to meet regularly once a week for a month. And if you're interested in doing so, you'll get the link to do that and to submit an interest form. So spots are limited for that. If that's something that is for you, definitely fill that out by Friday if you can. And we're going to also have another spiritual office hours, a chance to make a private personal appointment with one of the wonderful chaplains and spiritual leaders who are part of our SVIVAH community, and really have a chance to talk with them and share what you're holding on your heart leading into Passover. I don't know how to thank, first and foremost, Rabbanit Aliza for just, I'll lump you together with Rav Sarah, just like Sarah. Why is that? Just the 2 of you knowing that we needed to come together in a different way this year, that it wasn't just about pretending and going through the motions of Purim, but really to actively create something else, because this is such a v'nahafochu, such an upside down, such an everything that is different. And the idea of pretending that things are normal is like super not okay. I'm going to stop talking because all I'll do is cry. But I want to just thank you, Aliza. I want to thank Rav Sarah Mulhern for the beautiful ritual and prayer, and Dr. Guila Benchimol for like blowing my mind every time you teach this Torah of survivorship. And survivor can mean so many different things. And the Torah that you teach applies in so many different ways. It's just like this radical empathy and understanding and push to listen carefully in ways that we don't normally. And like these commandments of what it means to be community to other people and be necessary to someone else, necessary to their healing, and have an obligation to show up in that way. It's mind-blowing for me every time you teach. I'm not, we need a part 2 just for you to finish telling us about the rest of your trip to Israel, so I know where to find you. I'm gonna also say thank you to Rabbanit Dr. Liz Shane and Emily for helping so much tonight and making it so beautiful, and Rabba Dr. Anat Sharbat. I hope you listen to this afterwards, because thank you for taking us to Israel. Thank you for drawing us closer, for making us feel closer. It means the world. And may you have continued strength to do the gathering that you do every single week, every single Shabbat. And may hopefully all of us end up there one of these Shabbats soon in celebration. That's not just commanded, but that is really heartfelt and meaningful.